I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. This week, laying down tariffs on the yellow BRICS road. President-elect Donald Trump took this Truth Social over the weekend and threatened to slap 100% tariffs on BRICS countries that engaged in the years-long de-dollarization campaign. BRICS is a 9-nation alliance that features Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It recently added Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, into the fold. It is no secret that these economies have set their sights on shifting away from the US dollar. But whether their pursuits to abandon the buck and bolster their own currencies remains to be seen. So, is Trump overreacting, or is he just planting the seeds to prevent a further acceleration of the emerging market coalition's anti-dollar campaign? To help us dive deeper into this issue is our special and returning guest, Fergus Hodgson, an economist and the director of Econ Americas, and the author of the new book, The Latin America Red Pill. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Andrew. I love your show, and I'm glad to be involved.
Nice. You're one of the few people who do. I'm only kidding, of course. So, what's your take on Trump's announcement on Truth Social of slapping 100% tariffs on any countries that are diversifying their trade and reserves?
I'm disappointed in it. It is not a healthy form of populism. It's basically deferring blame. The US dollar is weakening as a currency because of a declining US economy and because of a precarious fiscal situation for the United States. So to lash at other countries is deflecting the blame. It's scapegoating. It reminds me a little bit of these proposals to ban corn syrup in soft drinks, where we all know that corn syrup or corn gets protection, like sugar struggles in the United States, let's say in a policy sense, and that induces or incentivizes companies to use corn syrup rather than sugar. So go for the problem rather than the outcome or the consequence.
So, okay, I have to push back slightly on the U.S. dollar weakening. Now, of course, fundamentally, of course, the U.S. dollar backed by nothing. It's lost, 99% of its purchasing power over the past century. However, when you see the U.S. dominance, it dominates 88% of all global financial transactions. Foreign investors are holding a record amount of U.S. debt. I think about $8.7 trillion, a record. And all these alternatives, BRICS accounts for 1% of global trade. Its reserve currencies represent about 5% of global foreign exchange reserves. So when you say that the U.S. dollar is weakening, what exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I agree with all your points there that for better and for worse, there is not a natural successor to the US dollar. And I don't think the BRICS really have the wherewithal, as you noted, to challenge the US dollar. Now, other currencies might. The euro, for example, or in the long run, Chinese currency would be in the fold. But so when I say it's weakening, I mean, there's just less long-term confidence, right? Because and that really stems from, even going back to the global financial crisis of 2008, where it just showed that the U.S. financial system was not as resolute as people might have anticipated. So since then, U.S. dominance of global trade and rule setting has gone down. And I think many people are looking for an alternative. There is not an easy alternative right now. So in many ways, it's a matter of perception and just less confidence, especially when it comes to, let's say, protection against inflation, right? So we all know that the U.S. has gone through basically its highest period of inflation since, the 1970s over the last few years. And that has caused higher interest rates. So and it's kind of an irony or an oxymoron there to say that, there's more debt being held by the United States by foreigners. Well, that's because the U.S. is in such a difficult fiscal position, right? That the interest payments and the national debt are just going like this. And so, people are holding more debt, but the U.S. is having to offer higher interest rates to get people to do that, right? If the U.S. was still offering next to zero, people would not be queuing up to buy U.S. debt.
You make a good point, and it echoes what Janet Yellen was saying. She said it repeatedly, and the most recent one was she was at the IMF annual meetings, and she was asked about the dollar strength as an international reserve currency. And when she was asked the question, the treasury sign fell on her podium. I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, overall, I mean that's what the argument is, that there's no real alternative in the global economy. Even the euro. The euro represents, I think, the last number I saw was about 18% of international reserves, according to the International Monetary Fund COFR data. Now, one thing I'm curious to get your take on, though, is that when you have, let's say, Trump's 100% tariffs on BRICS countries, or you have the United States confiscating, seizing, and liquidating a foreign country's assets that is not a direct conflict with, does this actually could this actually backfire the U.S. by doing the exact opposite, whereby it would strengthen another country's anti-dollar pursuits?
The U.S. is in a vulnerable position right now, and especially relative to the sort of geopolitical ambitions of China. And even within the Americas or the Western Hemisphere, this part of the world, China is now the major trading partner of most countries in the region. Now, that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Further, not only is it an economic switch of allegiance, that in terms of diplomacy, the United States and Israel, kind of like the bosom buddy of the United States internationally, are finding themselves more isolated. So one meaningful demonstration of this is a switching of allegiance away from Taiwan to Beijing, to the Chinese Communist Party regime. And in the Western Hemisphere, there are only two nations left, Guatemala and Paraguay, that still side with Taiwan over Beijing. So I do believe that the United States, since the United States has less economic and military wherewithal, cannot press as hard as maybe it did at one time, and should be a little bit more humble about how it approaches foreign policy. Now, I don't like the fact that, let's say, unsavory actors are displacing the United States, but that is the reality facing the White House or Washington, D.C. at this moment of time. And whether we like it or not, it's taking place. Yeah.
You made a good point earlier about the BRICS and how, there's a wherewithal and there's such internal strife among these leaders, which makes sense. So you have totalitarian leaders like Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin. Even on the BRICS idea, it was Putin who said he didn't want to expand the group, but it was Xi Jinping who also ultimately decided, okay, let's expand the number of BRICS members. Now, one thing I'm curious to get your take on, though, is how realistic is the de-dollarization campaign? A lot of people I speak to, they say long term, yeah, it's quite possible that the king dollar will be dethroned. But in the short term, it's not something to worry about. What's your take on that?
I agree with that. There is tremendous inertia to the U.S. dollar dominance of world trade. And historically, some other currencies have been more stable than the U.S. dollar. Even the Canadian dollar, actually, the loonie, was better managed up until the 2000s. And the Swiss franc is one that is well known to be stable, but not so much used in international trade. So it just is the case that the US dollar is used as a reserve currency around the world, and even as basically an official currency in places like Ecuador, Panama, El Salvador. So you just cannot reverse that overnight. Now, you would remember that years ago we thought that maybe Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies would come in and outcompete fiat currencies or state currencies, and that just hasn't happened. It doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon, right? So even if we might like it to happen, it seems to be a long time in coming. So yes, there is no clear successor, and that means the US dollar is, as one of my mentors says, it is the least dirty garment in the dirty laundry, right? So they're all dirty, but it's one you would still put back on to wear. So yeah, don't see any way out of the US dollar for most countries right now. And probably, I mean, this is a bit too early to speculate, but probably under a Donald Trump administration, there'll be somewhat of a short-lived revival in the U.S. economic situation. How long that can last, I don't know, but at least it seems like that will buy some time for the U.S. dollar.
Okay, so you said there's no, alternative to the U.S. dollars. How about we speculate here? So right now, there's been talk for so long about a BRICS reserve currency. Now, there was a lot of rumors that it would be a gold-backed reserve currency, and now it looks like it's just going to be a basket of, to quote E.J. Antoni, Peter St. Onge, a basket of basket cases where you're dumping the Indian rupee, Russian ruble, Chinese yuan just into a basket to form a BRICS currency. Now, what do you think do you think a gold-backed reserve currency would have more of a legitimate use case and alternative to the U.S. dollar that would perhaps have a longer lifespan to the greenback?
Yeah, so the one reason why the U.S. dollar has its current status is that it does stem from a gold backing, right, up until the 1970s. So if any other country, if let's say it were China, which is the natural competitor, were to say, we're actually going to have a gold-backed currency, that would be a tremendous threat to U.S. hegemony. Because if a country actually did that and meant it, that would really challenge or place competition with the U.S. dollar. However, I don't see any country having the patience, the institutional integrity to do that. A couple of years ago, there was talk about Russia backing its ruble with gold, right? And if you read beyond the headlines, though, because a lot of people jump on these things because there's a lot of anti-American or anti-US sentiment, and people jumped on that. Basically, you could give them gold, and they would give you rubles. There was no way they were going to give you gold in exchange for rubles, because you couldn't bring rubles to them. And so it was a bit like you can go to Argentina and go to the airport currency exchanges, the official exchanges, and they will take dollars and give you Argentine pesos, but they won't give any dollars back, right? It's very clear it's a one-sided agreement. And so any claim that the Russia had, even for a short while, some kind of gold backing was hollow.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember there was so much talk that the Mexican peso was going to be backed by silver. Chinese yuan was going to be backed by gold. I think it was Chinese contracts with Saudi Arabia that was going to be backed by gold. Or so much just reports of all these currency transitions. Actually, one of my colleagues at Liberty Nation, she sent me this article, and there's someone speculated that it was going to be the Iraqi dinar was going to backed by gold. So I guess newcomers to the econ world will say, wow, this is really going to happen. And then, of course, as you and I discussed previously, the longer you're in this game, the more you realize that, not going to happen.
The only countries that, in my mind, would have the willingness to do it are places like Singapore and Switzerland. But I just don't know if they're large enough to really challenge the US dollar anyway.
All right. So on that note, I'd like to thank Mr. Hodgson for appearing on Swamponomics TV. Thank you for appearing, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The Brick Street Boys have a long way to go before even sniffing at dethroning King Dollar. The greenback represents 88% of all international transactions, while BRICS currencies enjoy a fraction of that number in global trade. Still, for anyone concerned about the de-dollarization initiative, Trump's declaration on Truth Social might be good news after the current administration's silence on the matter. With 1 month to go until Inauguration Day, Trump's trade weapon is already putting William McKinley to shame. That's it from this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com, and be sure to check out my previous Swamponomics TV videos and interviews. Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates or campaigns or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.